Would you like to be wealthy? Of course you would. Most people do. Over the years, I've been fortunate enough to spend time around people with serious money, not just a few $1 million, but tens of millions, and even a couple of billionaires. And what surprised me the most wasn't what they owned, it was what they didn't care about. There's a quiet pattern I kept seeing over and over again. The wealthiest people I've met rarely try to look wealthy. In fact, many of them go out of their way to look ordinary. That's why I want to talk about something that sounds strange at first. Why looking poor can actually be one of the smartest financial decisions you ever make. Most people assume wealth looks a certain way: luxury cars, big houses, designer brands. But real wealth doesn't usually announce itself. People with real money tend to spend very differently. They're happy to spend on things that improve their lives long term: education for their children, opportunities that create more income, investments that compound over time. But impressing strangers, that usually ranks very low on their list. It reminds me of high school. There were always a few kids who tried hard to look popular: the clothes, the shoes, the image. And then there were the ones who didn't try at all, they didn't need to. Wealth works the same way. People who are truly wealthy don't feel pressure to prove anything. They already know where they stand. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. According to long term research on millionaires, the most common cars they drive aren't luxury brands, they're practical cars, reliable ones, cars that don't draw attention. That doesn't fit the image we're sold, does it? We imagine Bentleys and supercars. But most millionaires are just quietly getting from point A to point B, and there's a reason for that. They understand what money really is. When you're starting out in life, money is survival. It pays rent. It puts food on the table. Later, money becomes comfort, a better place to live, less stress. But for wealthy people, money becomes something else entirely. Money becomes a tool to create more money, a tool to buy time, a tool to reduce future risk. They ask a different question than most people. Not, does this make me look successful? But does this make my life better over time? That difference changes everything. Here's the irony: the people who look the richest are often the least wealthy. Expensive cars, luxury brands, large homes with large payments. Many of them are spending tomorrow's money to look successful today. And that comes with a price: stress, debt, pressure. Trying to impress people is expensive, and it rarely pays off. If you have money, you don't need to prove it. And if you feel the need to prove it, that's usually a sign something is off. There's an old saying, real wealth whispers. And I found that to be very true. So if your goal is to become wealthy, you may need to think differently, almost backward. If you want to be rich, you may need to think poor, not in the sense of deprivation, but in the sense of awareness, being aware of where your money goes, being intentional. One practical place to start is savings. If you're saving less than 10% of your income, you're vulnerable. That's just reality. 10% is a starting point, not the finish line. For real financial security, closer to 20% makes a difference. If that sounds impossible, don't panic. There are ways to get there. The fastest way is to clearly separate needs from wants. Needs are simple: housing, utilities, transportation, food, basic clothing, supporting your family. Everything else is a want. Most people underestimate how much flexibility they actually have. We saw this clearly during the pandemic. When spending options disappeared, savings rates skyrocketed, not because people earned more, but because spending habits changed. That alone should tell us something. Try an experiment. Live on your needs for 30 days. You can do anything for 30 days, then slowly add wants back in. Only the ones that truly add value or joy. The slower but more sustainable path comes with income growth. When you get a raise or promotion, don't upgrade your lifestyle immediately. Split it, half for today, half for tomorrow. That habit alone can quietly change your future. Now, let me share something that really puts this into perspective. One of the most well known wealthy individuals in the world bought his house decades ago for a modest amount, and he still lives there. Same house, same neighborhood, not because he has to, but because he doesn't need more. Another extremely wealthy individual reportedly lives in a small, simple home near his workplace. Not a mansion, not an estate, just enough. These people could buy anything they want. They simply choose not to. And that choice is exactly why they're wealthy. Looking average gives you freedom, freedom from expectations, freedom from pressure, freedom from debt. It allows your money to work quietly in the background instead of screaming for attention. If you stop trying to look rich, you give yourself space to actually become rich. And more importantly, you reduce stress, you reduce comparison, you reduce noise. Wealth isn't about image, it's about control. Control over your time, control over your choices, control over your future. And none of that requires looking impressive. So if you've ever felt behind because you don't look as successful as others, you might actually be further ahead than you think. Sometimes looking poor is the smartest move you can make. Thank you for listening.